Welcome to this special commentary roundtable edition of the In Focus podcast. I'm Peter Laffin, editor of the Washington Examiner's In Focus section, and today I'm joined by a trio of esteemed colleagues. Incisive Contributors editor Madeline Fry-Schultz, whose piece this week on AI toys is required reading for parents. Our eloquent Gen Z representative, Restoring America editor Jeremiah Poff, and our erudite and acerbic leader, commentary editor Con Carroll. Everybody, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Great to
Thanks
be
for
here.
having us.
Okay, so we're going into the Thanksgiving holiday, unless we're in Target or Costco, where it's been Christmas for 2 weeks already. It seems like now would be a good time to reflect on the political developments of 2025 and what we're most thankful for. So what are we most thankful for so far this year? Madeline, let's start with you.
I think probably the biggest thing is going to be the One Big Beautiful Bill, which I think was renamed to the Working Families Tax Cut, basically expanded or extended, made permanent the tax cuts from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And I think that's going to be a really big thing. Besides the tariffs, which we can get to later, is really going to be helpful for, benefiting the economy, making things cheaper, more affordable for families. And then something that's a little bit random. This wasn't a huge headliner, but I think has done a lot to be pro-family. Really great for me. People are going to be thinking about this as they're traveling for Thanksgiving week. Is DHS's Families on the Fly campaign. So they have rolled out where a lot of airports are now doing family lanes, special areas for families to be able to fly more easily. And personally, I just love that now when you go through TSA, you don't have to take off your shoes. I think that's great.
All right, that's great. Jeremiah, how about you? What are you most thankful for this year?
I'm grateful for a different provision in the One Big Beautiful Bill. I think that the ICE expansion provisions and the taking seriously the border security and immigration is probably the biggest win for for the conservatives and the Trump administration this year. And I think one will be one of the more enduring legacy projects of the Trump administration as well. And so I think that's one big win and one that I'm very thankful for.
I noticed that you made a distinction between the conservative movement and the Trump administration.
Well, I think that the Trump administration is the government, and then the conservative movement is the intellectual project that exists outside of the government. And so, insofar as those two are aligned, I think that's one, those are good things we're celebrating. And insofar as they're not, I think it's remembering that there are two distinct entities with two distinct goals. I mean, the Trump administration exists as a coalition of wide range of different groups that have some of which many would say are not conservative at all. But it also does include a lot of conservative constituencies and traditional conservative groups. And I think a lot of people need to remember that when they critique the Trump administration, that, not everything the Trump administration is doing is for the conservative movement, because it wasn't elected just by the conservative movement.
And surely sane border policy is good for everyone.
I think generally most people would agree with that, even a lot of people who on the left, and Bernie Sanders has started criticizing Biden's border policy recently and said that he opened the lane for Trump. So,
oh yeah, that was remarkable. Bernie for good, strong border security. Con, how about you?
Well, I don't want to steal Jeremiah's, but I think I do have a different take on it. I do think securing the border was the biggest thing, both in the short term and in the long term for this country. Just really being able to get a handle and end the Biden border crisis, which to be fair, I mean, Biden made it worse, but this is a crisis that really started happening in 2014. And Trump put a lid on it the first time, but didn't really quash it like he did in this term. Where I would differ with Jeremiah is I think what Trump showed is we didn't need legislation, right? We didn't need the One Big Beautiful Bill. The numbers collapsed as soon as Trump came into office. This is why all those editorials from the Wall Street Journal, all those people at the National Review who are like, oh no, we need legislation. We need Senate Republicans to compromise with Biden, and that's the only way we're going to secure the border. And Trump just proved them all 100% totally wrong. We did not need new legislation. We just needed a president with the political will to enforce the laws on the books and that ended the crisis. And I've never been Trump's biggest fan, but he came in and proved it was true.
I think I actually do agree with you that he didn't need a bill, but I think it's the provisions in the bill are worth celebrating because I think that they've drastically expanded the resources that were available to enforce existing law, and I think that that was necessary given the scale of the Biden open border chaos.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree that what was in the one big beautiful bill was helpful going forward. But I think the larger point of just proving that one, border security is doable, and two, that we didn't need legislation. I think those are huge policy points which won't be forgotten, hopefully for a generation.
And especially because, as you were saying, Con, the Wall Street Journal, National Review, most Republicans and every Democrat were so insistent that this needed to be a bill, and it didn't
Yeah,
need to be. I
and
can
it
admit
didn't need to be.
I was shocked by that.
Me less so.
Okay, I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to say the thing I'm most thankful for this year is that I'm glad Iran's nuclear program has been significantly derailed, destroyed, whatever. I'm glad that they've been knocked back a few steps. And I'm very glad that the war in Gaza is winding down, coming to a close. Um, because it's good that those things are gone, first of all, but also because it seems that U.S. deterrence has been restored. The world seems to respect our position as global leader, and hot wars aren't breaking out all over the place because I think people are a little nervous at what Trump is going to do at any given moment, and I think that his blend of saying crazy things and also seeming to have this ruthless strategy behind the scenes to execute his goals has been this perfect foreign policy blend, and that we in the world are in a much better place in terms of war. So I'm incredibly thankful for that.
Well, I mean, let's just get that on the record now before we have regime change in Venezuela. So, we'll see what the future holds.
You know, I give Trump, I give him some rope there. Like he's come through so big this year. I mean, talk about just needing a president to make things different. All of the deterrence that was lost under Biden. I mean, think about how far we've come since the pullout in Afghanistan to where we are today. I trust his team. Now, if this was the first thing he did, if this were late January and he were sending boats down to Venezuela right now, I'd be freaking out. But after, and I have to say, I was a huge critic of Hegseth too. But you can't argue with the results. I can't argue with the results anyway. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on this. Madeline and Jeremiah, I'm curious what either of you would think of that.
I don't know. I mean, Trump's foreign policy, I think, like you were saying, Peter, has kind of surprised me. Like I've been, um, he's very volatile in the way that he talks about things, but what he's delivered has been very impressive, I think, as far as you were talking about the nuclear program, like the peace talks in Gaza. I think that he's still got, say, these isolationist tendencies where he's not trying to get too involved in other places. And we'll see what happens with Venezuela. But I think that he has good people advising him, hopefully. And we'll see what happens next.
I think one of the things that people miss about Trump's kind of scattershot foreign policy is that it actually has a lot in common with the founders in that
Hmm.
his unwillingness to be involved in conflicts overseas and wanting to wrap things up, whatever, wherever that is, even though he will, issue a surgical strike here and there. But then on the flip side, when it comes to Venezuela, like I think that's so you have the Washington, stay away from entangling alliances aspect there, but then also you have in the Western Hemisphere the kind of Monroe Doctrine of like we're the kings of this continent and we're gonna run it. And the rest of you better get on board or else we're gonna start, you know, putting some pressure on you, whether it be militarily or economically. And I think, there's a lot of history behind that supports the effectiveness of that approach. And we'll see what happens whether he gets involved militarily on the ground in Venezuela. But I think he earns a lot of credit for that. And, I don't think that he's just kind of running from his own play sheet as much as he is kind of rehashing an old one.
Mm. Yeah, it's remarkable to think of all of these achievements this year have been made without losing a single American soldier. And I hope that when it comes to Venezuela, that he keeps that top of mind. And I feel like he will. I feel like we know Trump's instinct at this point. And I think the piece about our hemisphere is also really important. I think that goes directly back to appointing Marco Rubio in the first place, who has such a unique understanding of Latin America. So I'd say that's another thing I'm really thankful for is Secretary Rubio's performance this year. So even though there's obviously been some achievements, we can all say for sure that in the last few weeks there have been some red flags for both the conservative movement and the Trump administration, and how they intersect. And so I thought we'd play a little game here in our first special commentary roundtable edition, and we'll call this red light, yellow light, green light. Actually, it's probably just better to call it stoplight. And what we'll do is I'll give you a topic, and you tell me if you think it's a real issue for the Trump administration and the conservative movement going forward. And if it is a real issue, if it's something that we need to take seriously, you'll say red light. And if it's something that you think just doesn't matter at all, and we'll all forget about it, and Trump will overcome it easily, we'll say green light. And we'll start with the cost of living. It seems that one of the bigger red flags, to me anyway, that the Trump administration is facing about a year in to his second term is that his economic approval ratings are going down and consumer confidence is going down. That to me feels like a serious issue that needs to be corrected going into 2026. What say you? We'll start with Khan.
Red light on cost of living. I think could be his Achilles heel. I mean, I think voters, largely because of inflation, turned off Biden because of this issue. Trump cannot be seen to happy talk it away. And I think you've already seen some changes of this. I think, post-election, he did a couple interviews where he was somewhat dismissive of it. But then you saw him, really kind of do an about face on tariffs on a number of issues related to this, on coffee, on beef, on a whole bunch of other groceries. I think this is an admission by Trump himself that his tariffs are part of the problem, and I hope we see more from the Trump administration course correcting on this affordability issue.
I'm gonna say burnt orange. We're yellow going towards red. And I think I would echo pretty much everything that Khan said. I think Trump is, if not directly admitting, at least people in his administration, Scott Bessent is admitting that these tariffs are causing problems for American people, and they're seeing it at the grocery store. And so you see this recent reversal with coffee and beef that he's taking away tariffs so that the prices can come down, because those are products we know that people always drink their coffee. They're not going to stop drinking it, even though it gets more expensive, but they're going to get really frustrated by it. So I do think that this is something that's kind of starting to be acknowledged by the Trump administration. I think they realize that it's an issue. But you do still have Trump saying stuff like, we inherited this bad economy. This is Biden inflation. But Trump is the one who promised that on day one he was going to bring inflation down. And he did bring it back down a little bit, and then it's gone back up. And at this point, it's November. Trump took office in January. You can't keep saying this is Biden inflation. Biden did this. This is why, in large part, people elected him, is that he was this common sense candidate who was going to bring the economy back to normalcy for the working man. And he needs to actually make that happen rather than blaming the economy on his predecessor and continuing with these tariffs that aren't actually going to help people when they go to the grocery store.
Yeah, when I was listening to some of the folks in the Trump administration in the last week and on the Sunday shows, man, they started to sound a whole lot to me like the Biden people with transitory inflation, or at least that's just how it rung in my ears. Like, I don't know if America is cool with this right now, with giving I'm blaming it on something else or I'm downplaying it. It's like maybe we need to, really center ourselves on this and emphasize it more. So I completely agree with you there. Jeremiah, you've written in the past positively about the tariffs.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I don't actually think that a lot of the inflation issues is due to the tariffs, and I don't think the data even bears that out at this point. Um, I mean, even the Fed was kind of surprised that the tariffs weren't really affecting inflation in the way that they expected it would. But that being said, I do think that the cost of living thing is, as Khan said, the Achilles heel of Trump for the Trump administration, and I think the biggest glaring it is a red light for them. I think that the midterms will be won or lost on this, regardless of what redistricting is done um, in the various states. And I think the number one thing that I think is being missed here, at least in messaging wise, is I think the Trump administration has an opportunity to lean on its energy agenda on this because a large part of the way that you can actually bring prices down is to lower energy costs because that drives down the costs of transporting goods. And so that's really this, I would say, the simplest way to do it. But I haven't seen a lot of discussion about how that's happening, and you're still not. I mean, we're still seeing gas at around $3 a gallon. I don't think that the Trump administration would want, if they want to be able to say that they've done what they can on inflation and cost of living. I think a big barometer of that would be, can we get gas below 250 a gallon? And they've so far, you really aren't seeing that. You're really gas prices have been largely flat from what I've observed as, just anecdotally over the last year. And I don't think that, they fluctuated some, but not to the degree I think that really is going to make an impact in the way people see this issue. And I think if there's one thing that I would recommend that they do is try to get gas prices down. So then, seeing how that filters out throughout the rest of the economy.
yeah.
It's bigger than that, and it's bigger than gas, though. I mean, they've actually made some progress on gas, and you can see it's doable why you just need to pump up production, but they're going backwards on energy, on electricity prices,
Mhm.
and I don't think that that's necessarily their fault. I think a lot of that is a lot of AI and other
Yes.
stuff coming onto line, sucking up power. But that said, more progress can be made specifically on permitting reform in that, we do need to bring a lot more transmissions online. We do need to just bring a lot more power plants online. And I'm, they've tried, but how I don't think they've done a real hard push to do it,
And
in Congress.
there's a ton of idle and decommissioned nuclear power plants in California and in New York that they can, that there's already been noise in some states of trying to restart nuclear power plants. It's like start putting pressure on these places and encouraging them to do that. The one thing that I'm hung up on is that I'm not sure if even if you do permitting reform is how quickly are you actually going to be able to see those results and will
No,
you
you're
see
right. You're
them?
not. It would take a long time. But I mean, I still don't think that's a reason not to do it. I mean,
Of
sure,
course
try to
not.
try to
Mm.
pump up the nuclear numbers now, but I mean, the country needs permanent reform.
Yeah.
How does health insurance premiums play into all of this? That's been in the news a lot lately. Obviously, the expiration for the Obamacare tax credit extensions, it's gonna end at the end of this year. Um, is that going to? I'm curious how this is going to work because on the one hand, it that highlights the fact that Obamacare was a failure, and so that's bad from Democrats. But on the other side, obviously the Trump administration is in charge, and what's their plan? How do you think healthcare fits into this? Is that in the stoplight formulation?
I'll go first. I think it's a yellow light. I think it's generally always been Democrats' best issue. I do think there are enough people out there that would be hurt by this, even if they are, wealthy retirees who are getting, Obamacare subsidies so that they don't
They
have to
tend to
work.
vote more.
Right. Those people vote, right? So I mean there is a constituency of people out there that this is an issue for. Then on top of that, you have the issue slash problem that Trump is in no way committed to limited government healthcare reform. Like if he sees a way to broker a deal that he could, name it Trump care or something, he would. Not that he would do that, but like there's
Oh,
infinite
I don't
number of
know.
ways that he could come to a deal with Democrats, and they're going to have to. Like if we're not going to have a second shutdown in on after January 30th, right? If there's not going to be a shutdown come February 1st, Democrats are going to have to get something on healthcare. Otherwise, I do think they are going to shut it down again, and I don't think Trump wants that, and the guy loves a deal. So I think there is that danger there of, okay, how bad is this deal going to be? And so that's why I have it a yellow light.
Madeline, how about you?
Yeah, I think the problem here is that Republicans have yet to offer a good alternative to Obamacare. And you have been arguing against these enhanced subsidies, which I totally agree should be allowed to expire. But it's a very easy talking point for Democrats to say all these people, millions of people are going to get kicked off of their health insurance. Well, a lot of those people are pretty wealthy. A lot of them may be not even real people enrolled. There's a lot of fraud going on, but I don't think that kind of reasoning plays. I think people just hear a lot of people are getting kicked off their insurance or whatever. The premiums are getting more expensive, everything's getting pricier, and we want to bring costs down because everybody feels that. I mean, I think even with insurance, you go to the hospital for whatever reason. I gave birth this year, so I'm like still getting hospital bills. Everything's very expensive, and I think that people are waiting for something to kind of fix healthcare. And if Republicans don't come up with a good solution, if we don't have some way to, repeal Obamacare, replace it with something else, I don't think there's the political will for that right now. Obviously, the margins are razor thin. We need to, like Con was saying, compromise on something with Democrats. And it's going to be difficult to figure out what that is without just giving them the enhanced subsidies that caused this longest government shutdown in history. And we might have another one coming. So we've got to figure out a way. How are we going to argue that we are going to lower costs for Americans and not just say, okay, we don't want to do these enhanced subsidies. What else are we offering?
Okay, so last, it's the topic everybody seems to care most about in news media. Jeffrey Epstein. I hear there's been some news on this week. I know that some people think this is a nothing story. Some people think this is the most important story of the century. Where do you land? We'll begin with Jeremiah.
I mean, I think this is a yellow light bordering on a green light. I think that it's a very it's one of those issues that plays well in the media, but when it comes to the ballot box, I don't think the majority of people really aren't going to base their vote based on whether or not somebody voted for the Epstein files release and whether or not Trump is on board with that. And I mean, Trump has taken, it seems like three or four different positions on this. Most recently he said that Republicans should vote to release it. And then before that, he was putting pressure on certain members that had been some of his closest allies to take their names off the discharge petition. So, I think ultimately it's more of a distraction than it is a real political liability. And
So
I think I wrote something
who
to that effect a few months ago.
you did? Who cares more about this issue in terms of voters? Is it the far left or the far right? Who would be more in danger of being primaried as a congressman for voting the wrong way on this?
I
No
think the
one, no
Democrats
one,
right
no one's
now,
getting primaried over this. This is the biggest green light issue. There's a small sliver of people that care online, and they're very vocal, but no real people care about this. It is just the absolute, most partisan people on both sides.
I think if there were some Democrats out there that said they weren't going to vote for this, I think that they could face a primary challenge because this issue has become somewhat of a litmus test of anti-Trump.
Right. Madeline, what do you think?
I think this is ultimately a green light, and I'm not making a value judgment on that, whether that's good or bad. But I think it's kind of like what Jeremiah was saying. It's a lot of bluster, but at the end of the day, it's going to be what we talked about earlier, the cost of living that is really at the top of people's minds when they go vote. But it doesn't mean it's completely nothing because Trump is getting a lot of pressure. 84% of Democrats and 67% of Republicans want the files released. How much they want that or how much they care about it, I guess, is the real question. But you are seeing people like Marjorie Taylor Greene
Mhm.
flipping on Trump because of this issue. And so it is something that a lot of people on the right care about. A lot of his base do care about it, and they want to know what's going on here. So I think the best thing for Trump is to pursue transparency. if there's anything that can be released that he can release to prove that there's no smoking gun, then I think that that's going to be really good.
But that's just
Yeah,
it. There's no way to prove that, right? That's why
right.
this issue is never going to go away. It's always just going to be a slow burn distraction for a certain amount of people because there's nothing you can release that people will go, oh, they finally released the Epstein files, right? They've already released so much. You've got this new huge trove of emails from the Epstein estate itself, all these emails. People still think there's something more. There's nothing you can release that the crazy people who are obsessed with this would be like, oh no, they were finally transparent this time. I am satisfied.
Hmm.
I
It's
think
just
one
never
of,
going to happen.
I was going to say, I think, it kind of gets to that, joke that the conspiracy theorist is never satisfied when all the evidence debunks his point.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and that's, unfortunately, that's kind of what the online political ecosystem rewards,
Okay,
whether it be on the left or the right.
I'm gonna give a different take on this. I think this is a yellow going to orange, even though I agree with you all that I don't think there's a smoking gun in there. I totally share that mindset on this, and I don't think it's ultimately going to change too many votes on its own. Um, but I do think it matters politically to the extent that it affects Trump's relationship with the right. Madeline brought up MGT, and there's others, and we've been seeing more than enough rumblings in the past few weeks that there is an element of the right, of the new right specifically, that is eager to toss Trump aside. We've all seen the memes now with we're taking off the MAGA hat and we're putting on the America First hat. And if there
Okay,
were,
we've seen the memes, but give me one real good example of any politician in any election that actually involves a ballot box where this played a factor at all.
no, I see. I don't think it's going to matter in any election, but
Okay.
in terms of a Republican Party power struggle, I think it could matter. People, there could be a critical mass of people if there is some revelation that is kind of like, that's kind of sketchy, who might, are eager to get rid of Trump and move on to Vance. Who might say, okay, actually, this has finally crossed my moral line, and we have to impeach him. And then I think that gets interesting. Not necessarily that it would happen, but it would be enough of a distraction to affect the national conversation in a way that wouldn't be good for Trump or the conservative movement more broadly.
I
But
would
I
be
totally, yeah.
I would be shocked if there's anything that would push the new right to dump Trump into before his term ends.
Yeah, I mean, I would be shocked too, but it doesn't, his relationship with his base is fractured right now. There is something happening. And this story plays into that in a big way. And a lot of that is Trump's fault. Vance was on Theo Von in like March talking about we need to release the Epstein file client list, as if that exists. They've been feeding into this entire time. It's a total self-inflicted wound. And the Democrats couldn't be more cynical about this too, obviously. They ignored this story willfully for 15 years. And now they care about the victims. Like, are you kidding me? That they're trying that line. But to me, the whole thing is volatile enough that I say yellow light. This is our first episode. We have like 30 seconds of the Zoom left. Thank you all so much for being here. This was a ton of fun. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thanks for having us.